What's going on, you guys? My name is Troy, or Bias, as you can call me. That's what I go by in game. This is my first video on this channel, and today I want to talk about aim assist. This is going to be a very unbiased view where I talk about the advantages and disadvantages of each input and its implementation in various games and kind of how it affects gaming in general. I wanted to do this topic because I'm planning on being an Overwatch content creator, and there's a lot of talk about Overwatch's implementation and the system that it has in play, and that if aim assist should be brought to PC lobbies. I'm going to talk about that part in another video, but I will also kind of touch on Overwatch in this video in each game, like Apex Legends, Destiny, Halo, COD, Overwatch. We're talking about the different like advantages and like elements of aim assist, like rotational aim assist, reticle friction, and bullet magnetism. We're going to talk about a lot in this video, so try and just sit back, relax, and try and stay focused because there's a lot to kind of take in here because aim assist is kind of complicated. It's not as simple as most people believe. Okay. The first thing I want to talk about is I want to talk about the fact that what people don't really understand is that one of the biggest problems with the way that aim assist is implemented currently in modern day is there is no choice for the mouse and keyboard players that are playing on PC, because Apex Legends does not allow you to opt out of playing against controller players that are on PC. And the most various games, they have an input-based matchmaking, but because of the separation of the pools of players, because you have PC on PC controller, you have PC mouse and keyboard, you have console that opts in and console that opts out. So you have four pools of players. So what ends up dying out is the mouse and keyboard players end up dying out as far as the...
What's going on, you guys? Bias here, and I wanted to edit this in that the reason that the PC pool of players dies out is because the tournaments are combined or they're controller only. So like in Call of Duty, it's controller only tournaments and it's multiplayer, and then in Apex Legends it's combined, Halo it's combined. In the games that do have input-based matchmaking, the tournaments are combined anyways. So anyone that is worth anything, like anyone that's a good player, is going to play open anyways. So then the mouse and keyboard only like input queue ends up dying out anyways, because like I said, it's mostly about how you treat your game. And if you treat your game like it's going to be combined at the highest level, there's no point in having input-based matchmaking. It doesn't really save anybody because like I said, the mass majority of players are going to end up playing open because that's where all the good players are, or it's perceived as where all the good players are anyways. So like I said, input-based matchmaking is a band-aid. It doesn't really fix the main underlying issue.
That pool of players, and then you end up having to queue open. The way that you solve this is, we'll get into Overwatch's implementation later, is by kind of following its standard, and we'll talk about why. But for the most part, what you need to understand is it's mostly killing off the casual scene, because on mouse and keyboard, there is no ability to play casually, to just have fun. And that's something that I think all gamers should be able to do, because what controller does is it kind of raises the bar a little bit and makes it where if you're a bad mouse and keyboard player, you cannot have any fun at all. You will get destroyed. And if you're even an average or good mouse and keyboard player, you have to be trying a lot more so. And it makes the game a lot less fun. So I think that that's one thing that we need to get off the table first. Now let's talk about the advantages and disadvantages of mouse and keyboard and controller, okay? Regardless of what most people believe that there's tracking advantage to controller and a flicking advantage to mouse and keyboard. This is not necessarily true. Mouse and keyboard is really good at tracking. Like, there are mouse and keyboard players that can track perfectly and will blow your mind. It looks like they're cheating because it's a skill. It was a skill in like old school arena shooters like Quake and Unreal Tournament. But it's really hard to do because you're predicting where a player is going to go, where a player is strafing, and where a player is going to move to, and you're reacting to it. It's mostly reaction time. So this skill is pretty hard to get down for a lot of players, and controller ends up being more consistent at it. As far as flicking, this is an element that a lot of people get misconstrued and don't seem to understand how mouse and keyboard actually works. Mouse and keyboard is not more consistent at flicking. Its controller is still more consistent at this area, as far as a DMR, a Magnum, or a Wingman from Apex, or whatever game that it is that you play. Think about a gun that takes multiple shots to kill, and you're flicking it to the target like a flick-based semi-auto weapon. Controller is still more consistent with that gun. Where it's right about flicking is with speed. Mouse and keyboard's main advantage is speed. It is faster. So that what this relates to is target switching from target to target. And because of the speed in between, mouse and keyboard has some room to shine in certain games. So that's where mouse and keyboard's advantage really comes into play, is speed. This also relates to movement because you can flick and do certain movement mechanics that you just can't do on controller. So that is something that plays into part two with the movement, but it's mostly target switching and speed that is the main element of mouse and keyboard that is the advantage. You also have pixel perfect accuracy. What this means is an absolute pixel. Very, 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 very long range where you can just see a pixel of a player. That's where mouse and keyboard can kind of shine. It's super, super, super small targets. But for most games, this doesn't really come into play because the sight lines aren't long enough, or there's just not, the map design doesn't really allow for it. So we're going to talk about how they each work. The advantage of the controller is pretty simple. It's more consistent. It is a more consistent input at aiming.
Controller is not better. PC players have gone crazy, bro. Controller is better. Controller is better.
So once I got that figured out,
I don't know how people can even argue that anymore. It's because mouse and keyboard players can hit zip line bounces or fucking wall bounces and hit sick flicks. Does not make the difference of the fact that controller has literal aimbot.
Let's get right into it.
Aim assist that helps your aim in up close and medium range fights. That is just complete. That's not even close to fair. I don't care. I don't care if I'm a controller player. It's not fair. This whole game is based around winning your individual fights, and if you have aim assist, which is a way to be an unnatural form of aim, it's better.
Let's see who I get.
That's the best way that I can describe it to you. Because of the way that aim assist is designed and implemented, it is designed to be consistent. And aim assist is really designed for casual players. That's what it was always designed for. Controller was designed to be a casual input. It was never designed to be a competitive input. In fact, in the early days, you didn't even have the settings that you have now as far as changing dead zones and changing like all this random stuff that you can do now to really dial in controller. You couldn't do that back then. And aiming on controller just felt bad, even though aim assist was just as high. A lot of people think that aim assist is higher now. No, those old titles were really high. The implementation of controller was just clunky. Moving and aiming felt weird in those old games. It felt really awkward because of the way that the implementation of controller was designed. But they all had really high aim assist. They really do. And we'll talk about each one in this video. So the elements of aim assist is you have reticle friction. What reticle friction is, it's dividing your sensitivity by a certain value as you pass over a bubble around the player. What I mean by a bubble is it's like a hitbox. So there's a certain like radius around a player that you get, and it procs reticle friction. And it divides your sensitivity by a certain value, makes it a lot slower. So that way you're able to hit shots as you go over the player. The reason that this is actually implemented to allow you to play on a faster sensitivity than what you normally could. Because if you didn't have reticle friction, what you would have to do is you would have to lower your sensitivity to what that sensitivity is that it's getting divided to as you pass over the player. That would be your all-around sensitivity if reticle friction didn't exist, because it wouldn't be lowering as you pass over the player. So without reticle friction, a controller player could still play, but they would have to play on a lot lower sensitivity to compensate for the lack of this reticle friction as they pass over a player. Then you have rotational aim assist. Rotational aim assist works with reticle friction. What it really is it's trying to move your camera to match where the player is going. So as the player, let's say he moves left, your character will turn towards that character as he moves. This is what really helps you in strafe battles and movement tech like that. And the reason that it really exists is because if rotational aim assist wasn't in the game and reticle friction was, when a player was close to you and was strafing like past your view, you would not be able to keep up with him because your sensitivity is getting divided as he's passing over your reticle because of reticle friction. So rotational aim assist helps you keep up with that player. That's really what it's mostly for. Its implementation, as far as how strong it is, really depends on game to game, because the bubble is larger for it to proc, and it's stronger in certain games than other. It reacts a little bit faster in certain games than other. It just depends on how it's implemented. But for the most part, that's what you need to know about rotational aim assist. Then you have bullet magnetism. Bullet magnetism is mostly like curving bullets toward the player and making shooting a little bit more forgiving. It exists on both inputs in certain games, and other games only have it on controller. I think bullet magnetism needs to be phased out, to be completely honest. I don't think it really does anybody any good. I think the other two do need to exist, but we just need to talk about how they need to be implemented, because without these two these two things, like reticle friction and rotational aim assist, controller players would have to play on a lot lower sensitivity, and I don't think that it would necessarily be fun for a lot of casual players that play on controller, because controller is designed to be a casual input. It's designed for you to come home, have fun, and chill. And I don't want to take that away from controller players. I want them to be able to do that. So I do think those two need to exist, but I don't think bullet magnetism does. I think it does nobody any good. Then you have countermeasures to aim assist. You have like recoil, you have sight lines, with like long sight lines, as we talked about with range. You have projectiles. Melee lunge is a countermeasure to mouse and keyboard, because a mouse and keyboard player now can't slide or break your camera view and then juke you out. Melee lunge will help you keep up with him. It's mostly an advantage for controller because of it allows you to do things you otherwise couldn't because you're too slow.
What's going on, you guys? Bias here. I'm editing the video and I'm gonna do some cut-ins to where I explain or clarify on some certain things. It's on a different setup. I'm sorry, it's a different day, so I'm dressed differently. But just to not have you confused, I don't talk about Warzone in this video. I'm talking about the multiplayer of Call of Duty. The reason I don't talk about Warzone is just I've heard things like players have told me about the balance, but I myself don't have as much personal experience in a game like Warzone, so I'm not comfortable giving my opinion. I try to give my opinion on games that I know for certain. As far as mouse and keyboard and controller, I have played them both and kind of experienced the game at least enough to get a grasp on how they play in each respective input. I've played Warzone, but not nearly enough to really know enough about the way the game plays overall to really get a full grasp on its balance overall. That's why I don't mention Warzone. Also, when I'm talking about the game's balance of mouse and keyboard versus controller, I'm not talking about the strength of aim assist itself, the value of aim assist, because the value of aim assist is kind of irrelevant. It can be stronger in a certain game, but be better balanced in that game because of the way the game plays and the game's overarching design. For example, Destiny 2, that we'll talk about later, actually has some of the highest aim assist values in all of that I know of in first-person shooters as far as some of its guns. But it does have things in the game that do help mouse and keyboard players a little bit. So that's something that we'll talk about later. So the balance is talking about the way the game is designed, not necessarily the value of aim assist, because I think all modern games that I know of are pretty high. So it's kind of irrelevant to talk about the value itself. I'm rather talking about the balance of aim assist. Hope you guys enjoy.
Now let's talk about each game and its impact. We have Call of Duty. Call of Duty is one of the best dual input games on the market. It has a really fast time to kill, which allows target switching to really come into play. Because of this, M&K can do some things that controller just can't, because target switching is pretty important in a game with pretty quick movement. Like, the movement starts off quickly. It doesn't take a lot of momentum to get going. And with the really fast time to kill, you're killing players really quickly. So switching from target to target and even getting on the target in the first place is an advantage in a game that you kill players that quickly. So mouse and keyboard can do some things that allows it to outplay people. Because of this, I would say that Call of Duty actually is one of the better dual input games on the market. Because Call of Duty doesn't really allow mouse and keyboard in its esport, and because I don't think Call of Duty would really gain a lot from allowing mouse and keyboard in their esport. I don't think it has a lot of potential as far as its esport growth. I think that its implementation is fine, and I'm fine with it. So I think it actually is one of the better implementations of the market. When it comes to Apex Legends, it's actually one of the worst dual input games on the market. The movement is very momentum based, meaning it has to ramp up before you really get fast. You can kind of cheese this with like zip lines and different ledges and things like that to use different movement tech to speed yourself up quicker, but it's reliant on certain factors for you to do that. And for the most part, what you need to know is Apex Legends has a really long time to kill, and with the movement, there's very little importance on target switching in a game like Apex Legends. So what it really comes down to is the importance of being consistent in hitting your shots is more important than target switching. So it doesn't end up favoring mouse and keyboard, but the tricky part here is at the highest level of play, like tournaments and stuff, there's a lot of poke damage going on, because the way battle royales play is you get in a spot, you kind of hold the spot, and it's coordinated plays. Like, you have 3 players that are well coordinated, and you're kind of shooting long range at players doing poke damage. Because of this, mouse and keyboard does have a place in its esport, but I still would say it's one of the worst balanced, because I think it kills off pubs and ranked players that play on mouse and keyboard that might otherwise play, because of its implementation, a controller player has a massive advantage in any type of medium range gunfight, which is most of your gunfights that are important. Like I said, in the tournaments and in very well coordinated play, the chip damage is really important. Like poking at a player and just shooting them across the map is really important. But as far as its impact on the game overall, I think it makes the game really hard for mouse and keyboard players to really get into and want to play and want to get better at because of how strong controller is. I think it would have a bigger PC player base if it wasn't combined like it is. But the tricky part about Apex Legends is I don't think it could be fixed because battle royales have to fill lobbies and you have a lot of players. So you couldn't separate players because I think that eventually it would start to die out, and because there was multiple pools of players and you have a ranked scene which has pools of players based on rank, I don't think you would be able to do it because, like I said, in a game like Call of Duty or Halo or Overwatch, there's only like 6 or 5 or 4 players per team. In Apex Legends, there's like 60, 70 players, and you have to fill lobbies, and it would take forever to get in lobbies. I think the game would die. So I don't think there's really any fixing Apex Legends. It launched this way. I think it's going to have to stay this way. And for its tournaments, I do think controller hurts its overall esport growth, but it is a battle royale at the end of the day, which isn't really respected as much of an esport as other games. So I don't think it necessarily would grow all that much either way. But I'm just mentioning this, that I do think it's one of the worst dual input games in the market. Destiny. Destiny, oddly, is also one of the best dual input games on the market. It has a fast time to kill. It has very quick movement. It starts off really quickly, and it has bullet magnetism on mouse and keyboard. Do I agree with bullet magnetism on mouse and keyboard? Not necessarily. Like I said, I don't think bullet magnetism should exist. I think it needs to be phased out, but it does allow mouse and keyboard to compete in the game. The reason that I don't have a problem with mouse and keyboard being buffed artificially with bullet magnetism in a game like Destiny is because they don't really take their game seriously. They don't have an esport. They don't really care about the competitive side of the game. It's mostly viewed as a casual game for PvP. So I'm perfectly fine with there being bullet magnetism in a game like that doesn't declare itself as a competitive game. And like I said, because of the fast time to kill, the quick movement, and then mouse and keyboard being easier to aim, I think that it is one of the better dual input games where mouse and keyboard actually can compete in this game and reliably kill controller players, even if the controller is more consistent. I do think it's one of the better dual input games. Now let's talk about Halo. Halo is the worst on the market. It is the worst. There is no game worse. It has a high time to kill. It has little to no movement that is very impactful. It has very high rotational aim assist, meaning that it's a left stick shooter, meaning you're moving to aim. You're not really aiming. You're moving to aim. Because of this, I don't think Halo will ever have a mouse and keyboard scene. I've seen players, like there's a guy named Shyway in the Halo scene, I forgot his name for a second, that talks about how mouse and keyboard could get better. And he talks about giving bullet magnetism to PC, mouse and keyboard players. And he talks about, flick-based weapons like a DMR or a Magnum. I completely disagree with this take, to be completely honest. I think that if you give a Magnum or a DMR, it will feel better. Sure, like they're more fun to use than a battle rifle. There's no doubt. But do I think that it'll help the difference between the two inputs? No, I don't. I don't think so at all. I think that it would do little to nothing. Because, like I said before, the advantage of mouse and keyboard is speed. And what use is speed if you're shooting a weapon that takes like 3-4 shots to kill? It wouldn't matter. It just because it's flick-based would not mean nothing. Regardless of this, and like I said about the bullet magnetism, the reason I have a problem with implementing it into Halo to make it mouse and keyboard artificially keep up is because Halo treats itself as a competitive game. They have an esport. They dump a lot of money into it. That's part of their scene. I don't think it would be good for the game because mouse and keyboard players wouldn't respect it. Mouse and keyboard players respect games that take a lot of aiming, take a lot of skill. And if you implement bullet magnetism, I can tell you already, they're just not going to respect the game. They don't respect Destiny because of bullet magnetism. I promise you they won't respect Halo. And I don't think that players being overly accurate is good for a game that treats itself as a competitive game. I don't think there's a solution to Halo. I think it's too late. I don't think mouse and keyboard players would come back regardless. So I think that you're kind of stuck with what you got. You could nerf aim assist and maybe they come back and maybe they try it, but I'm going to be honest, I highly doubt it. I think the game kind of really put a bad taste in mouse and keyboard players' mouth, and they don't ever want to try the game again. It also has really bad mouse and keyboard implementation. It has a little bit of input lag and things like that, but even if mouse and keyboard was perfect, they wouldn't compete with controller players in a respawn game mode, short range maps, and really long time to kill and no movement. They would never be able to compete in that game. And I think that it is the worst on the market by far. And I don't think there's really a solution at this point. I think they pushed the players away too far, and it's been too long, and they haven't done anything. I think they'll never look back. Overwatch. Overwatch is actually the gold standard. I know players are going to be mad at me because I know there's controller players on PC that argue that it's not fair, that all this stuff. I mean, you're right. You're at a disadvantage, but it's a choice. You're choosing to play on PC with a controller. You're plugging in a controller to PC. When you buy a PC, the PC platform is mouse and keyboard. That's what people think of when they think of mouse and keyboard. When you think of console, you think of controller. And so because aim assist is not present in PC lobbies, what it allows the game to do, and this is the main topic that we need to really get through about aim assist here, is it allows the game to be casual on both sides. Because console, they can play, they can have fun, they can have all the aim assist that they want and have a fun time with no mouse and keyboard players, except for Zim users. I want to throw out that there are Zim users on console. That's not fair. They should be banned. Those are cheaters. That's not really the implementation of the system. That's just they haven't banned people that are blatantly cheating with Zim. But for the most part, it allows a console scene to develop because you do want controller players in your game. They're a massive pool of players. You want those casual players in your game. They're good for your game's growth. But you do not want them to impact the other pool of players, the PC players. The PC players are the people who are going to grow your esport. There are people who are going to grow your competitive side of the game if it's a game that's worth growing. And Overwatch is a game that's very mechanically demanding, depending on the character. But it's very mechanically demanding, and it is an esport that has a lot of potential. So what Blizzard basically says is, we're going to allow you to play together, but if you play in PC lobbies, we're not going to allow you to ruin people's game that didn't choose to play with you. So if you join on your friend that is a PC player, right? If they gave you aim assist, every player in that lobby would now have to play with you. And it would ruin their game because they didn't choose to play with you. That's the main topic we need to understand here, is player choice. Console players should not be forced to play against PC players, which means mouse and keyboard players. And mouse and keyboard players should not be forced to play against aim assist. I don't think there is a problem with aim assist, but you just need to understand its impact. And that's the main topic of this video, is that you are going to push away any casual side of mouse and keyboard. If they're a casual mouse and keyboard player, they're not going to have fun if they're put in console lobbies because controller is just easier. And it's not fun. It makes them have to play a lot harder. And you don't always want to do that. They should be able to just play against people on the same input as them. And controller players should be able to play against people on the same input as them. And then by having controller in your esport, like Apex Legends or like Halo, the problem is controller is not as watchable of an input. So it's not going to be as exciting of an esport as it would be if it was a mouse and keyboard driven esport. So its growth is now neutered because of the input. The only game that I would say that really you wouldn't benefit from going mouse and keyboard in your esport would be Call of Duty, because like I've already spoke about my opinion on its esport. But games like Apex Legends, I think that if its esport had launched and it was just mouse and keyboard like Overwatch, I think it would be even bigger than it is, not smaller. And I think that Overwatch, despite its struggles from not developing any content in the state of the game, I think that it actually is the gold standard for the way that aim assist is implemented, because neither player base can interfere with each other. You still get to have aim assist. It doesn't have to be nerfed. But if you play on PC, you're at an understanding that I chose to play here, and I'm not allowed to destroy this entire pool of players. They're allowed to play the way that they are. And I understand the game is designed to play on mouse and keyboard at the highest level, being its esport. So I hope this made sense. I tried to break down the advantages and disadvantages of mouse and keyboard and controller. It's a really long topic. I apologize for the length of this video. I tried my best. But I think it just needs to be said that neither input is really broken, and neither input is really the problem. It is the developers throwing them together that is the problem. I could get into input-based matchmaking. People say, oh, we'll just put input-based matchmaking in the game. The problem then is you have too many pools of players. You have a pool of players that are opting in and opting out on console. You have PC controller, then you have mouse and keyboard on PC. So there's way too many pools of players and a length in queue times, depending on the size of your player base. So I just think that the system that Overwatch has in place is probably the best one, because I'll just talk about that more in the Overwatch video. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Like I said, I tried my best to explain it the best way that I can. If you disagree, let me know in the comments. Leave a like if you like this video. Like I said, I try to keep it very unbiased. Even if you don't agree with me, we can be civil about this, and we can talk about this in a very communicative way to help gaming. I'm here to help gaming, not mouse and keyboard. That's what you need to understand. I'm here to help gaming. And like I said, I think that Overwatch is the game that most games should follow. Hope you guys enjoyed. Peace out.